Greetings, respected viewers. So I'm George from Ireland, commenting about this grain deal that was signed just yesterday. Now, Ukraine and Russia both signed it, but I think they didn't sign the same document. It was agreed at Istanbul, Turkey, brokered by the Turks and the United Nations. And Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, was there in Istanbul for this. So Odessa is the only Ukrainian port still in the Ukrainian hands. The Russians are illegally occupying all the others. So Ukraine produces at least 12% of the world's grain, a considerable proportion of its wheat, cooking oil, barley, and so forth as well. Um, so this is shipped out mainly through the Black Sea. It has to pass through the Bosphorus. That's a strait in Turkey through the middle of the city of Istanbul. It's not a river, it's the sea. At its narrowest point, it's only 800 meters wide. So that choke point is something the Turks could very, very easily control. And Turkey, crucially, is a member of NATO, but is very independent-minded, is not terribly cooperative, has a more amicable relationship with Russia than any other NATO country, um, partly because over 1 million Russians holiday in Turkey every year, and the Turks don't want to miss out on that money. And in 2005, when they had a spat, the Turks shot down a Russian plane, military airplane, for violating their airspace. Putin banned flights to Turkey. It hit the Turks' economy. Other things to bear in mind, also there's Azerbaijan, which is Turkey's brother nation, but the nemesis of Azerbaijan is Armenia, which is a Russian military ally. So the Turks don't want to hack off the Russians too much. They're increased military support to Armenia. But at the moment, Russia's so enfeebled because it's embroiled in this bloody war, it can't support the Armenians too much. They don't want a recrudescence of the conflict there in the Caucasus. But anyway, so what's going to happen is neutral ships sail to Odessa. They'll be inspected on the way by the Turks and the Russians to ensure that no weapons are being shipped to Ukraine. The ships will pick up the grain from Odessa. They'll be guided by Ukrainian boats through the field of sea mines, and then they'll come out and they'll sail back through the Bosphorus, that's Turkish waters, out of the Mediterranean Sea and deliver the grain wherever they go. So countries which are highly dependent on Ukrainian grain are Moldova. Well, obviously that's adjacent to Ukraine, that's delivered by land because Moldova doesn't have a coastline. Lebanon, Egypt, Bangladesh, a few others like Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, they all buy significant quantities of Ukrainian grain. And in some of these countries, people are living on $2 a day. So if the price of bread goes up even a few cents, then people are driven to malnutrition. And the people are often, in abject penury at the best of times. But just the day after this was signed, there have been Russian missile strikes on Odessa, on that port city. Now, the Russians claim they hit a depot which was storing Western arms. Now, tellingly, the Ukrainians didn't dispute that, nor indeed have they confirmed it. So that might actually be true. But quite often, when the Russians destroy a civilian target like a hospital or a university or an apartment block, they say, oh, they were using it for military purposes, which is not always bull. I mean, you might put snipers high up at a building or something. Are there soldiers actually you're fighting from a hospital firing out of it? Ooh, possibly. I mean, I don't know that that's confirmed. But anyway, this would seem to suggest bad faith. Anyway, President Volodymyr Zelensky said it was barbarous. Now, much though I respect Zelensky and much though I despise the Russian regime, I don't think that is a barbarism, this particular one. Many barbaric crimes have been committed by them, but not that. Do I think genetically modified crops should be allowed in the United Kingdom? I really don't understand the science of it, so that's not strictly pertinent to what we're talking about now. So it seems to suggest that the Russians are not committed to this. Well, why do they sign it at all? And another thing is, Dr. Johnson would say, if you triumph of hope over experience to actually trust the Russians, who would be imbecilic enough to believe a single word the Kremlin said when they said they were not going to attack Russia, sorry, attack Ukraine? They said this is not a war. They said it is not an invasion. They've given you 15 years in jail for saying it's a war or an invasion. They said that they did not want to take any Ukrainian land, and now they say that they are. And they said that it's a Nazi regime in Ukraine. I mean, the most flagrant lies, lie after lie after lie, unblushingly told. When they attacked Crimea in 2014, they said, no, 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 these are not Russian soldiers who moved in there, before boasting that they are Russian soldiers. So no matter how stupidly obvious the lie, they will persist in that lie. No matter how ridiculous they look, they will double down on that lie. It's the big lie theory. The most outrageously blatant the lie is, the more people will fall for it. Anyway, That's going on now. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in Cairo right now. He's meeting his Egyptian analog. However, the Egyptian President Mohammed Fattah al-Sisi has chosen not to meet him. Now, officially, Egypt is neutral on this conflict, but in fact, they have a rather cordial relationship with Russia based on purchasing cheap Russian armaments. Won't be too many sales of those now because the Russians need them all for themselves. Russia's one of the biggest arms exporters in the world, partly because their weapons are at the bottom of the price range. And the other factor is obviously tourism. A lot of Russians coming to Egypt, but they won't be able to afford it so much. Their economy is going to contract at least 12%. Those cheaper airlines are going to go bust. Anyway, there was that. Um, he's going to address the Arab League, probably Sergei Lavrov. Lavrov has on his African itinerary a few other countries: Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia. I think that's it, to convince them that yes, these grain shipments will go ahead. So about 13 countries have got ships waiting, 70 vessels waiting to go in there. But the one thing is, these Ukrainian vessels guiding them through the minefield will therefore show the Russians be able to observe where the safe way is through the minefield. But I don't think they'll be able to launch an amphibious assault. I mean, they've got Harpoon missiles, these Danish manufactured anti-ship missiles. Now, the Russian naval assets in the Black Sea are now on the Sea of Azov to be out of range of the Ukrainian Harpoons. But if they then try to attack Odessa, they'll obviously be within range. You see, the Russians weren't even able to hold on to Snake Island. Now, the Ukrainians have notably not put their soldiers back on it or their sailors or whatever because they'd be too vulnerable there. I think the obvious thing for them to do is because that island is actually claimed by Romania as well. I remember years ago seeing Insula Sharpilor on a Romanian map, but I'd never even heard of the island. And who to think all these years later becomes so significant? The thing is for Ukraine to get sort of sign a 99-year lease to Romania, which is a NATO country and an EU country, and Romanian troops could be there simply to deny it to the Russians, and maybe then American troops, loads of NATO troops. Well, not loads; it's a pretty small island, but from several different countries. So the Ruskies know if they attack Snake Island, then NATO will hit them back. Um, the Russian obviously campaign is getting bogged down. There's these Ukrainian counteroffensive around the Kherson area. They've blown up most of the bridges across the river there, so the Ruskies can either withdraw or bring in more supplies. And okay, I know there are some amphibious vehicles, but that's not as easy as just driving over a bridge. They can't bring in the quantity of ammunition, fuel, food, anything else they need. Goodness. Um, it's not looking good for Russia. Obviously, more HIMARS and so are going to be supplied, and other of these long range rocket systems up to 30 were provided by the United States alone, and a few other by other NATO countries. But NATO countries are supplying nowhere near enough because it is winnable for Ukraine if enough weaponry is given by Western countries. And obviously, we fought with Western metal, but Ukrainian blood. And obviously, for NATO countries, it's better that Ukraine fights Russia than NATO has to. This deal, I just don't think it's going to get off the ground. And Russia's doing this to try and reassure countries who've got a fairly good relationship with them, less economically developed countries, that we're not going to starve you. We're not creating this as a weapon of war. But they are. I mean, there was no problem until Russia invaded in getting the grain out, and thinking this will cause some pressure on Western countries to make concessions to Russia in other areas or to end the conflict or whatever, or some of these countries will vote Russia's way in the United Nations. And some of that might work, actually. Another notable development is obviously the Jewish agency in Russia. There's a court case against it. It might be shut down in just a few days. Yair Lapid, the new prime minister of Israel, says if you do that, that will significantly impair your relations with us. This is an organization which helps the Jewish community in Russia, helps them immigrate to Israel. And Israel has condemned the illegal aggression against Ukraine and so on, tried to act as an honest broker. The previous Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was in Moscow saying anything I can do to help. Can I facilitate negotiations? But no, that was rebuffed. But there are elections coming up in November this year in Israel, and the perpetual Israeli politician Bibi Netanyahu, who's just really come back for prime minister about the sixth time. 1995, I think, was the first time as prime minister. He's in his 70s, and Moscow perceives him as more inclined towards them, and they think this might boost him. Remember, there's a significant Russian Israeli community there who might vote Moscow's way, but Obviously, Russia's always playing a double game. They're the close ally of Syria, which is the deadly enemy of Israel. And the Russians can say to Israel, "You don't play ball with us, and we'll be more supportive of Iran and so on." But Iran is fairly isolated. And what can Russia do? It doesn't have much money. It can't spare any weaponry. It can't really cause a problem for Israel. Right. So about 22 million tons of Ukrainian grain are left or stranded, have not been exported. So there's about $10 billion that Ukraine made from this, and you can't export anything like that amount by land. There just aren't enough trucks and trains to do so. Okay, so the whole scheme is meant to kick in mid August, be fully up and running. But I mean, there might be some ships going out, but I don't see it happening on a significant scale. And Russia would try and exploit it, might try and sail in and attack Odessa. I doubt they'd be successful because Ukrainians have very much anticipated this. But that's why Ukrainians have to proceed with circumspection. So don't forget to donate to me on Patreon, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Also look up my website, georgefromireland.com, various other feeds. Thank you. Goodbye.